I think you know that bishops have coats of arms. You can see some up on the wall there. And there's a motto that each bishop chooses. Some of you may know that our own Cardinal Dolan, on his episcopal motto, has the words, generally in Latin, ad quem ibimus, which means, to whom shall we go? So our own Archbishop has chosen a phrase from today's Gospel as his motto. It's a good question for our own times. To whom shall we go? And some are not interested. Well, I just was reading yesterday in the Huffington Post, they did a poll, some of you may have seen it, asking people to describe God in one word. So they had a list of the top 10 responses. And some of them are what you would hopefully expect. Some almighty, God is love, God is creator. God of love is number 10, which I don't get. It should be number 1. Anyway. But you also had among the top 10, God is fiction, God is imaginary, and God is non-existent. It's a challenge. I mean, you have to engage. It's like the parable where God spreads a banquet and says, come to my banquet. And I said, no, I got to go do my job. I got to go to my farm. I'm too busy. Which is, all right, don't get involved, but then don't be surprised you don't know God. It's a relationship. You got to engage. There are some, who don't believe it. There are others. I've met some, including one of my teachers, who said, I don't believe in God. God is as plain as the nose on my face. I know God exists. Carl Jung was said to have said something similar as well. Well, not even Christians, necessarily. It can be that evident. I mean, to me it would be like someone coming up to you and saying, your wife or your husband or your child, I don't believe they exist. And you'd say, what? Well, you know they exist. You have a deep personal relationship with them that they've never met. Same with God. So you have to engage. There's a wonderful story in the Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky of the great Starets Zosima as people come to him for spiritual direction, and there's one aristocratic lady who comes to him and says, I'm losing my faith. I don't have faith in God anymore. You know what he says? He tells her, get out of your manor house and do an act of love for somebody, an act of charity, care for somebody. Go out into the street. So he doesn't give her some intellectual argument to prove the existence of God. He says, engage, love. Then you might get a glimpse of who or what God is. Another famous line, I think, from Song of Bernadette, the book, Franz Werfel, who says, if you want to believe in God, start making the sign of the cross. I mean, the same idea. That it's not something you can think yourself into or convince yourself of in your head. That's not going to work, thank God. But it's something you have to live and experience. That's the only way we can move forward, is to know God by experience. So there are obstacles. People put up obstacles to belief that there is a God or a benevolent God. The whole theological branch called theodicy is dedicated to that. It means justifying God, justifying God's ways to the world. Now, of course, we're the ones who should be trying to justify our ways to God. But in terms of justifying God to people, well, one of the main complaints all through the centuries, and certainly today, still is, if God is good, why is there so much evil? Why is there so much suffering? If God is almighty, why does he allow all this pain and suffering and evil in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people? Okay. Legitimate preoccupations. We keep asking the question. So what's God's answer to that? Well, as hopefully we've come to expect, there's no answer. There's no intellectually satisfying voice from heaven saying whatever. It's something lived, which is the response. That's the response. Jesus on the cross. Now, we haven't always presented it that way. In fact, we've presented it in some pretty horrifying ways. Stupid, ridiculous theories like God was very angry, and he needed a really big sacrifice, so he had to send his own son to shed his own blood and to appease his anger. Yeah, that's going to make me believe in a benevolent God. Yeah, right? No! What's the lived response? Well, I've certainly come to believe, understand, I think that if God is going to create a world that contingency, time and space, matter, choice, freedom, which I think it inevitably comes out this way as creation, then you're inevitably going to have pain, suffering, and the possibility of evil, injustice, and cruelty, and death. So what's the answer to that? That's the answer to that. God says to the whole universe, even before humans come along, by the way, but he says to us, go and have the adventure, and I'm with you every step of the way. And he's so with us every step of the way, I'm with you to the very end of the age, as Jesus promised, that he sends his own son to share in our condition. God himself experiences the cruelty, the injustice, the pain, the suffering, and the death of our world. And that's the answer. I mean, it's not an answer, but it is. It's a lived answer. It's saying, yes, this is the way the world is. Pain is inevitable. But it's worth it. His answer is, you're going to have pain, you're going to die, you're going to probably experience injustice and cruelty, you may even perpetrate it, but in the end it's worth it. So much so that I'm engaging myself in that drama. I'm living it with you and for you. So, that's the answer. But somehow going through the death, and all the different deaths we have, and losses and betrayals and suffering, that we come out to resurrection on the other side. That life and love and joy and peace will be victorious and are so wonderful. We can begin to taste them now, of course, amidst everything else. That it's ultimately worth it. And all the mystics of all traditions of all times have said that. Not a single mystic of any tradition has ever said, you know, I've gotten to the bottom of existence and it's really rotten. It's not worth it. No one has ever experienced that. Take the great mystic Julian of Norwich, 14th century, English, solitary. She said, sin is behovely. Even sin works for the good. God makes all things work together for the good. Oh, happy fault, as we sing on Easter night. God uses everything in our lives. Somehow. And she said, the world, the universe was like a hazelnut in God's hand, small and delicate, but God holds it. And she said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. Sounds crazy? That's what the mystics find. So, if we want to experience that, what do we need to do? Become a mystic. Duh. In other words, as I said before, we need to engage. We need to live. We need to act. We need to experience this for ourselves. We need to see the mystery of Christ in the church, that we are one body with Christ, as the Eucharist promises as well. Experience what that actually is and feels like to become one with Christ in this drama, in this life that is His. As Jesus Himself Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. He didn't understand, why have you abandoned me? But yet he still trusted. He lived enough and long enough and deeply enough with God that he could trust that it will work out, despite all the evidence to the contrary, and there was a lot of it. He knew what the psalm said. God is close to the brokenhearted, and those who are crushed in spirit he saves. Many are the sufferings of the just person, but out of them all God delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Or the first reading, when the people promised to serve the Lord after the 40 years in the desert. They experienced God's presence in the 40 years in the desert and knew that it was worth it. So we have to become mystics. As has been said very well, if religion, any religion, doesn't help you to deal with your pain and doesn't make you experience God, teach you how to experience God, it's not worth it. Get another religion. It's not worth it. So we have to get to the essence of what our religion is to help us to experience God in Christ and show us to be able to deal with our pain. It's been said also, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. What does that mean? The Buddhists say it too. It means pain is inevitable, but all the suffering which comes from your mental resistance and resentment and hatred and fear is optional. You don't have to react that way. Nothing's making you react that way. And if you have a deep relationship with God, you won't react that way. You'll have pain, but not that kind of suffering. Try it. So we need to have that kind of depth of experience. And when we know this is what it's really all about, wow, then we can put into context all the other stuff that comes along, the baggage that often comes along with religion and life and everything else, our own baggage, with greater hope and perspective. Like the second reading today. What it's all about is, as Paul says at the very end, I speak about this great mystery, which is the union of Christ and his church. Marriage, for example, is participation of and a reflection of. But all the stuff, all the patriarchal stuff from there, about men being head of his wife and all of that, we see in perspective. Because we have a deep experience of what that really means, the union of God and his church, masculine and feminine and all of that, we know and are able to recognize and call by name the patriarchy that has come down in most of, for example, the Abrahamic religions. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity across the centuries and still today, in case you haven't noticed. But that's another scandal, of course, that people say, well, we don't believe in that God. Well, that God is underneath, sometimes hidden by all the stuff, but it really is there. And what it's all about gives us perspective on everything else. So it needs to be a matter of experience. There are some young Catholics today who say, and I've heard them, I believe because it's crazy. Eat the body and blood of Christ? Really? It reminds me of what Tertullian, the ancient father of the church, said at the year 200. I believe because it's crazy. He said that. Credo qui absurdum est. It's absurd. But he also said that the soul is naturally Christian. In other words, if we really do engage in the experience of what the faith is, it'll all come together in our experience. We're made for it. In the image of God, naturally Christian, naturally made for God. So we'll experience it, and then it won't be absurd anymore. It still won't make sense intellectually, perhaps. But who cares? We don't live there. We live here. We live here. We live our lives. And that's where God meets us, in our actual lives. So there are many reasons that we can do what the disciples did in the gospel. It says return to their former way of life. Literally it says in Greek, they went backwards. Lots of reasons we can go backwards. Lose faith, get depressed. But if we have a deep relationship with God, we can say, well, to whom shall we go? We have come to believe and are convinced, as Peter says, you are the Holy One of God, that it does make somehow sense in your great plan that God is on our side, that it will all work out, that it is all worth it. Now, who wouldn't want to live like that?